Welcome to Bounce Back Stronger, the podcast that explores ways to find peace and purpose after difficulty. I'm your host, Donna Ferris, and today we have author, meditation teacher, and cartoonist Amita Schmidt with us. A little about Amita. Amita is a resident teacher at the Insight Meditation Society, the co-founder of Southwest Sangha, a registered social worker, and a cartoonist. I reached out to Amita after I read her book, Dipa Ma, about the female Buddhist master. Dipa Ma was renowned for teaching meditation and mindfulness amidst the everyday busyness of her simple apartment in Calcutta. Her influence can be seen in the teachings of Sharon Salzberg, Joseph Goldstein, Jack Kornfield, and many, many others, all of whom were interviewed for the book. Amita, thank you for joining us on Bounce Back Stronger. I'm so honored to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
So, as I said, I reached out after I read the book, and the reason I read the book is in a podcast that I did with Sharon Salzberg when I asked her about the person that most influenced her of all the people that she met. It was Dipa Ma. And that sat with me. And as I went back and edited that podcast, I was like, I got to find out more about her. And I bought the book and read it over a period of time. It was part of my meditation readings and so much wisdom in there. And then I was like, I have to get the author on the podcast. And so that's how we got here today.
Great. That's great. I love to hear that that was the most important influence for Sharon. Beautiful. And it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think she tells the story that when she was, I guess she was 18 or 19 when she worked with Deepa Ma, and she was like, I'm going back to America, I'm getting my stuff, and then I'm going to come back and live in Calcutta. I'm going to be here with you. And she's like, no, you're not. You're going to go back and teach in America. And she's like, no, I'm not. I'm coming back here. And they went back and forth a bunch of times. And she was right. I mean, Sharon came to the States and stayed and taught and is one of the key teachers in bringing mindfulness and metta meditation to the States. So, um,
Yes. And in that story, Sharon didn't really feel confident and believe in herself. And Dipa Ma kept saying, you can do anything.
mhm.
Don't let your thoughts of that you can't stop you. So that was a very empowering moment as well for Sharon. That sense, don't believe your thoughts that you're not going to be a teacher, that you don't deserve to spread the Dharma and spread your wings. So she was very empowering to women. Well, to everyone really, but especially women didn't have a lot of role models then. When Sharon was in the Dharma, it was mostly male role models. Mahasi Sayadaw was really prevalent then.
Mhm.
And it was all about noting, 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 this kind of really dry, Theravadan, precise. And Dipa Ma was just about love and encouragement, big hugs and empowerment. So she really represented a big change in the scene there for Joseph, Sharon, and Jack at the time.
Yeah, and maybe let's talk about how you found her, because I think that's an interesting story, how you came to write this book and get involved with insight meditation.
Yes, I had been practicing. I found meditation because of kind of tremendous suffering. Both my parents had severe mental illnesses. My
Mm.
mother died. She tried suicide several times and died by the time I was 16. She was dead. And my father was very violent.
Oh,
So I just really struggled a lot with suffering and trying to understand what is this suffering and is there an end to suffering? So I was reading the Buddhist teachings and he seems to talk about the end of suffering. So I got really into Buddhism at 19 and sat my first retreat at 24. And then I sat my first 3-month retreat at 29. And that was a retreat that Dipa Ma was supposed to teach, but she died that year. She died in
oh.
September of 1989. I was 29 then. And so there were just a lot of stories on that retreat about her because everybody's heart was really open, missing her. So it was just a retreat filled with Dipa Ma. And at the end of the retreat, I went to Joseph and I said, somebody needs to write about her. And he was kind of like, well, we're all too busy. At that time, they were all writing books and teaching full on at IMS. And so he just was like, you should do it. And I'm like, I've never met her. And he was like, doesn't matter. People write about the Buddha and they never met him. So I was like, well, you got a point there. So I kept asking everyone to make sure there was nobody that wanted to write about her. That was one of the big teachers. And sure enough, they wanted to pass it on to somebody else who had the time and energy. And I was only 29. So it was like, okay, let's go for it. And I spent 12 years collecting stories, going all around the country, phone. I went to India, I went to Myanmar, Burma at that time. I mean, it was amazing, just the sojourns all over the world to meet people. And I feel so grateful now that I did that then, because Donna, most of those people have died
Wow.
that were in the book, like 90% of them, especially the Indian and Burmese. Myanmar now is not a place you could ever go,
Yeah.
and do interviews anymore. I reflect now on how something is a calling, do it, because that window would have closed if I hadn't seized that moment and all those stories.
Mm.
And so then I just became, for 12 years, kind of, it was almost like Dipa Ma was just guiding me. She was like, okay, talk to this person, do this, do that, do that. Like the whole way, it was almost like, I don't know, a channeling or something. I'm not
Mhm.
really into that, but it was strange. It was like, wow, something greater than me is leading this book.
And and
So she
she had that kind of connection. I mean, she had
did.
developed that kind of mental magic is probably not the right word, but a word for it that she was able to do that. The enlightenment level was there.
Yes, yes. And one of the things that surprised me writing the book were a lot of people talked about how she was still guiding them after her passing, that they still heard her voice. She still appeared to them. She appeared to people that had never met her. I mean, it was a little bit like the stories of saints like Ramana Maharshi or Neem Karli Baba, that people get visitations,
Hmm.
and so I was kind of blown away by that, because I'm not somebody that kind of believes in that stuff so much. So it was fascinating to hear all these people talking about her influence even after her death on them. So I realized there was something powerful there with
For
that.
sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And how do you see her influencing Sharon Salzberg, Joseph Goldstein, and Jack Kornfield, and so many others that were listed in the book? How does that influence show up, you think?
Well, a couple ways. I think she brought that love component. Her influence just was this incredible love. It had a fierceness. It had the
Mhm.
fierceness of the noting. The noting practice was really prevalent then for them. But she just brought this kind of magical love and blessing, and it just brought a new factor. And the feminine, of course, the feminine quality. There weren't other female master teachers out of Asia. I mean,
Mhm.
there just weren't any. I think Rena Sakar was mentioned to me as like a Burmese teacher, but she didn't have the same stature as Dipa Ma. And so there just wasn't any female role models. And Michelle McDonald described Dipa Ma as a lighthouse. And I love that word because she became a lighthouse of love and loving kindness as part of the practice, and all this heart, in addition to the fierceness and the precision. And then she became a lighthouse for women and for everybody. You don't have to be a monk to wake up.
Mhm.
You can be a woman, you can be older. She was older when she woke up. She woke up in her 40s, and that was just unheard of. A householder in her 40s, a woman, uneducated. It just was unheard of. So she was a lighthouse with like, hey, anybody could do this. Anybody can find ultimate freedom and peace. She did it, you can. And she really emphasized that. Like, I'm just this ordinary woman. I don't know anything. I'm not intelligent, even though she was. And Jack Engler later showed that in some of his testing of her. So it was incredible inspiration, I think, to the Westerners to see this tiny little woman with incredible powers and wisdom and love versus
Mhm.
these big monastic men who had been in monasteries most of their life. And she was a mother and grandmother too, which I think was an inspiration to someone like Jack who had kids.
Yeah, and she really fought to get taught, right? She would go with her family to the teachings, and that was an inspiration, I thought, too, to me, and to your point. Like she had to fight her way through a largely exclusive group.
Yes, yes. When she started practicing, her daughter was only 8 years old. Imagine having an 8-year-old kid and trying to go on these long retreats. It was challenging.
Yeah.
And the other thing about it was because she was a woman, she wanted to practice at a very young age. She was very spiritual, doing Buddhist chanting, thinking about practice from when she was a little girl. She was constantly discouraged by her family, by her husband, because that was just the culture, right? Women didn't go and practice alone, you know? So if she had been in a male body, she would have like started practice way, way sooner. It was only after her husband died that then she went
Right.
to the monastery. So she was really prevented because of being a woman in that cultural milieu. You really saw that the detriment, and then she overcame that. But what's cool, Donna, is once she really woke up and it was clear how awake she was, actually the monks really embraced her at the
Mm.
Mahasi Center and they asked her to teach and they wanted her to stay there and teach, which was just absolutely unheard of in a totally male-dominated monastic culture. They wanted her to stay. And the reason she left Myanmar was because there was like another one of their coups, and it just was not looking good for Indian foreigners. She was an Indian foreigner. And so she made the decision for her daughter's sake and education that it would be better not to stay in Burma, Myanmar then. So she left. But the monks were very supportive of her because they recognized the truth of her awakening. So that says a lot too, I think, about her and them.
Yeah. And one more story, kind of in that earlier time, is she was really ill when she decided to meditate. She was quote unquote dying of a broken heart, right?
Yeah, she had heart issues. She had two conditions. She had very high anxiety. She could be probably diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. She was a very nervous, anxious person, worried about a lot. And then, of course, she kind of had body issues that mirror the anxiety, just a lot of health problems, including heart issues, right?
Mm.
Very nervous disorders. And she, as a result of practice, all of that was completely gone.
Mm.
And her family started to meditate because they're like, oh my God, Auntie, she was an aunt, right, to these of their sisters and nieces and nephews. And they saw that she all of a sudden had no anxiety. And she had been this nervous wreck and with all these health issues, and all of a sudden nothing. So they were all like, wow, we want to go practice. So her whole family joined her because they saw these tremendous changes. And again, that's an inspiration for all of us. Like, wow, you can have really strong anxiety and the practice can eliminate it. She was fearless, no anxiety ever once she had her awakening experience. Is she had more than one, it seems like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what a testament to the power of the practice. I mean, she really was an example of the power of the practice.
Yeah.
To
And she did it every day, right? So it's always this idea that if you're keeping yourself away in a retreat center and you're a monk and you're not really interacting with daily life in any way, it's a lot easier to maintain a practice, possibly, right? You still have to deal with your brain. I'm not saying that that still isn't one of our biggest foes, right? But she was doing it in her everyday life, in the midst of Calcutta, in her apartment, which again is very inspiring we don't have to have a separate space. We don't have to go into the woods or although I love that. You know, I'm big on forest bathing. However, you don't have to. You can do it anywhere. And I thought that was a really great example too.
Yes, it was. It is. She emphasized both. She said, when you feel ready, make time in your life, go on a retreat, even a weekend, 10 days. It's important to have that dedicated practice. But she said, yeah, the rest of the time, even 5 minutes a day, she was big on like, hey, you can only do 5 minutes a day. Because, like you said, she worked with these housewives
Mhm.
and their husbands and their families weren't allowing them. Often the women ran the family of many of her students. So they didn't have a lot of free time. And so she just was like, let's do 5 minutes right now. And then can you do 5 minutes when you're at home? And they were like, yeah, of course. And she was like the 5 minute miracle. She was always trying to get people to do 5 minutes, then 5 minutes more. And then also this idea of everything you do in your household, do it with mindfulness. And then on addition to that, hey, when you feel kind of ripe and ready, and she'd kind of always notice it with people, she'd be like, go on retreat for a few days or a week, and then boom, people would have often deep experiences at the right timing with retreats. So she really did kind of a nice combination of constant mindfulness, make sure you sit every day and go on at least a retreat when it's feeling like there's momentum.
So, how do you see Dipa Ma's legacy living on today?
Hmm. I think mainly I've noticed her influence because I've been around all her material now for like 30 some years, right? I see like she's taken on a little bit of a guru cult
Hmm.
status,
Hmm.
which is okay. I kind of knew that would happen when I wrote the book. And I think it's that inspiration. Like, when figures get more and more removed, right? Because their death was longer and longer
Hmm.
ago, they do tend to take on that larger than life kind of gurification. But there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's an element of the love that I can do it, you can do it, the fierceness, these qualities like pop out
Hmm.
about who she was. And we're just left with a few things about her 30 years later. And that would be the love and the mindfulness and that hey, this is possible for anyone.
Yeah.
And don't wait till later. She was a big one, like, don't wait till later. Like she was really like, don't think that you're gonna have all this endless time.
Yeah. And it's fascinating because the meta meditation really kind of was brought to the US, I think, through her. Is that correct?
Not sure that's true. I mean, U Pandita was teaching it to some, but she really embodied it and did it way more and constant. She was constantly blessing everything, and yeah, she lived metta and practiced it a lot more than the monasteries
Had
kind
at
of
the
were
time.
doing it more as an adjunct to the mindfulness. What I think is cool is I noticed writing the book, she kind of combined the two. At one point, what really struck me was she said, mindfulness and love are the same thing, and love and mindfulness are the same thing. Like she just said, like they were just interchangeable. And that really made me do a double take. She said, when I'm fully loving, I'm being mindful. And when I'm fully mindful, it's loving. And I remember going, these could just be combined as one thing. And that kind of opened my mind up to kind of what she was doing there
Hmm.
was a little bit of backdoor showing you that love was always there. It wasn't just this dry mindfulness where you're the practitioner. It was just this giant kind of love bath. She was always doing love baths with everyone, head to toe love baths. And so often when I work with people like clients and stuff, they might be talking. I work in, mental health, and I'll just do a love bath like she would do in my mind's eye. It's just so much fun.
Yeah, it's almost a Reiki cleanse too, to a certain extent, which is
Yeah.
I'm a big one for that
And
too.
that's part of the practice too, right?
Yeah.
She kind of she kind of showed us that it's all a beautiful thing. The Dharma has so many facets to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what strikes me about the love and mindfulness thing is that if you're fully mindful in the moment, it's hard to be frightened. Whereas the same thing, if you're fully in love in the moment, it's hard to be fearful either. In fact, most people can't. You can't really have both of those emotions at the same time. So fear is the opposite of love. So it does make a lot of sense that if you're fully in the moment, really loving the moment that you're in and not dipping ahead or behind, it is similar.
I've noticed this with Joseph. I've
Mm,
been sitting with Joseph for 40 years. And in the beginning, he was like very geeky, very heady. And over 40 years of practice, he's just gotten so open-hearted, compassionate. He's like way into love.
mm.
And there was not a modicum of love way in the beginning in the early 80s. He was just like, did you note it? Sorry, Joseph. I love Joseph. And so I just watched that development and went, wow, that's cool. The development of practices towards more and more love. And personally, I've just found that we're also finding more and more what the truth is as we practice. What's
Mm,
true? Our mind states aren't true, or, what's illusionary, like the Buddha,
mm.
what's illusionary? Mara, I see you. And I find, and I don't know if this is true, Joseph and Sharon, but loving kindness seems to really underlie the essence of our existence. And that just kind of starts to reveal itself more and more. So, in a way, if that's true, then love is just coming through everything. As we get more aware, we see that. And it's infinite love. It's
Mhm.
not just like, oh, I see loving kindness and I'm in loving kindness. It's like, no, this is like infinite, eternal love coming through everything. And
If we
that's
don't
just
get in the
been
way of it.
my observation. Yeah, if we're not in the TV set of
Yeah,
our story, our thoughts about politics, our own life, our own suffering, and we look around, we go away from the TV set and we look around, it's like, oh my God, we're in this huge interactive universe. And my teacher jokes, he's like, Mita, who put the right amount of space between everything? And he's like, it's such a miracle. And I'm like, it's true. Who did put the right amount of space between everything?
that's right.
And so,
Everything can be viewed
yeah,
as a miracle.
yeah. I think we just start to open up to the magic, as you know, the mystery, the magic, and the wonderment of it all. And Diva, I think, just kind of lived in that. She didn't talk about it a lot, but she just was the embodiment of that constant blessing. She'd bless all the fish in the aquarium and the plane, airplanes and cars, and everywhere she went, she just was blessing, blessing, blessing. So that would seem to indicate she was in that kind of constant state of that infinite loving awareness, almost like coming through her like a, I don't know, a receptor or cell tower.
Yeah. Yeah. And just for listeners, the Sharon Salzberg episode has a deep discussion of metta. It is the four phrases that are typically used, but there's many other ways of doing it. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be safe, may you ride the waves of your life in peace. That one last one sometimes gets changed, but there's a really deep discussion of that in that episode. But that's what we're talking about to a certain extent. I'm sure Dipa Ma did some different blessings, but that's the loving kindness meditation, if you're wondering.
Yeah, she was really about being the blessing all the time. And I've seen the evolution for me is like it's not just practicing metta, you are the love right here now. Like you can do a practice of it, but don't forget you are that metta. You are born of metta as metta right now. Don't create a character that then is practicing, be it practicing it.
Yeah, it's the ultimate modeling of it, I think, too,
Yeah.
right? It's really, and I've said this before on another podcast, but we really can't change other people's behavior. All we can do is model the behavior that makes us love and happy and hope that other people say, "Hey, I want some of that." It's like in that Where Harry met Sally. Can I have some of that? That's what you want to find.
And you start to see eventually as you move along, and Deepa Ma, I think, embodied this, it's all one thing.
Hmm.
It's all you. Like it's
Hmm.
all one body, it's all one love, it's all one thing. And so then you can't help but your heart just open. Like if your hand was hurting and it's all one body, you'd be like, oh, right.
Yeah.
And so that loving kindness is just naturally there when the illusion of separation starts to fall away and you see, oh, it's all one thing. And then the love pours in. And that's the beauty of practice. And I think Deepa Ma just knew, like she blessed everything because she was just blessing herself all day long as the one. Oh, here's a glass. This is an embodiment of myself as love. Yay, I love it.
If you stay resonating at that level, all the blessings come, right? I mean, and not that we do it for that point, but it is a self-fulfilling thing.
Yes. And then it shows other people this is possible in all of us. We don't have to be divided. And boy, is that going to be an important theme in the years to come and right now. Non-division, non-separation, one love, one body, one being. It's important that people hold that. Even if you just have to do it cognitively, my teacher's always like, just start with the cognition. Eventually, the somatic and the deeper heart knowing will follow.
It is even more important too to be careful of who you are surrounding yourself with.
You
Uh,
bet. You bet.
Not in a judgment way, but
Yep.
in a energy and influence way. Be careful of the inputs.
For
Of,
sure, Donna, for sure. Yeah. And Deepa Ma talked about that. She loved everyone, but she said, I don't spend time gossiping. You can know everyone is one thing and love, but we don't like every food and we don't expect ourselves to like every food. So you can know everyone's love or God, but that doesn't mean you're going to eat every food and you're going to
Mhm.
like every food. There's certain people that aren't good for you, like you said, or don't taste good or don't feel good to your energy system. And it's okay to pay attention to that, just like we would foods.
I love
Like
that.
that doesn't agree with me. And like you said, no judgment. It's just
Mm.
like that food doesn't work for me. And, that person who has the program of kill all humans is not someone I want to be around. Like you said, it's important to choose wisely,
Because
even
it
though you
influences
might
you.
know everybody is ultimately, this one truth. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess one of the things I think about is too that we're working so hard on this path, right, to remember love, and it's because it's a constant awareness. Because just because we think this way and we know this is the best path, we still are triggered all day, with our things, and so you want to be aware of that. That to stay on those paths, you do have to do the practices and be the awareness of the things that take us off that path and keep coming back. And that's a practice. Those are all practices. These are not just things that just happen. Even Deepa Ma, I'm sure, had her moments. And I think it's important to say that and to know that you can do it, but it does take practice.
It does. Good point. Yeah, it does take practice. But realize when you get triggered or upset, that's the thought you. The
Hmm.
thought, Donna, the thought, Amita, the thought you gets triggered, upset. The real you, the infinite awareness you, is never
Hmm.
triggered by anything. And so sometimes I just try to pendulate to that. Yeah, the thought me is upset, triggered, worried about something. But the universal awareness you, fine, always fine, deathless. And so occasionally, I think Deepa Ma did this to pendulate.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's fine to have the triggered thought you, but move to that bigger thing outside your TV set that's never triggered, never will be. And then right there it is. There's the love, there's the awareness.
That's really
Um,
helpful. I
yeah.
like that a lot. I like
Yeah,
that
and
a
then you
lot.
don't have to get rid of the thought you. It's just like, oh yeah,
No.
it's upset. But this other me, the universal awareness mind, your universal mind is fine.
Yep.
And
And always there.
Yeah, and I don't think people really have to make that up. When you feel like, okay, what's the non-thought me right now? Or what's the awareness me? You can feel that that's not caught in anything. I think if you just go to it in the moment, I'm a real big proponent of see it here now. You can feel like when you just go to your universal awareness that can feel everything happening, it's okay. It's genuinely okay when you're
That's right.
not in the thought you. Yeah.
Yeah, you're safe.
Yeah, you're safe and it can kind of hold everything.
Yeah, it's a bit of a surrendering, right? Too. I mean, because
Yeah.
there's a limit of what we can do, and we have to believe that there is a bigger thing going on here. Love is bigger, the universe is bigger, and this too shall work its way through for
Yeah.
sure.
And in the level of impermanence, and Dipa Ma was real fierce
Mm.
about looking at impermanence. All of this is going to end. The
Hmm.
earth is going to end. You're going to end. Like every single thing you can see, taste, touch, smell is on its way out. On its way out. So even the whole galaxy, even. So when you really can just rest in that, have fun.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. What are you upset about? Let's
I
just enjoy
know.
this
Like,
moment.
I
Yeah, you
mean,
come
it's
back
like
to
so
that.
kind of funny. Like, what part of impermanence did we forget that all of this is going to be gone? Every institution, every political system. And again, that doesn't mean you neglect in the here now your right action, right? But when you really hold that, like, A, nothing's happening and it's all on its way out, it just becomes kind of funny, whatever
Yeah,
you
it
decide to
does.
do.
It does.
Like,
It is
like
amusing.
this is all good. It's like the giant sand mandala the Tibetans do. It's like
Yep,
they do it with great perfection and love, knowing they're going to blow it away the minute they finish it. Well, every day of our life
it's
is
like
like
that.
that.
Yep, I do this flower mandala thing instead of sand in my retreats, and it's the same thing.
Hmm.
We're just gonna put that in the trash. I'm like, we can take a picture first, but we're just gonna put it in the trash. We use it as a freeing thing too. Here I'm freeing all this emotion that I had around that. But you're absolutely right. You make it perfection or whatever that is to you, whatever prettiness it has to be, and then letting it go.
Well, and then it begs the question, what are you doing here? What are
Yeah,
we really doing here? Are we trying
yeah,
to perfect the character, get life to cooperate in a certain way, or is it something else?
yeah. And why do we need it to be perfect? We need that acknowledgement. We need that show, here it is thing. Like, what is that? Yeah, there's a lot of good questions in it.
Yeah, we had a really tremendous fire here that was became a
Oh
disaster
no.
site overnight where I live on Maui. And a lot of people came in to help with the trauma, these brain spotters. And they use it's this technique, a therapy technique, very effective to help with trauma. And one of the people that was teaching us, she said, what's your eulogy goal? If you've passed away, what do you want to be celebrated for? And she was using that to help people with the trauma. And I started to think about, like, that's such a good question. What does Donna want to be celebrated for, or Amita? And I think if you can ask that question, it'll kind of show you what you're meant to do now and now and now. Because,
Okay.
if it's, hey, I want to be celebrated for being a really wise person or a really loving person or someone who brought joy or introspection into people's lives, then do that now, do that now, do that today, do that tomorrow. Even if the world falls apart, that's your job. And
Hmm.
I just found it so helpful to know the eulogy goal
Yeah.
and then to
Eulogy.
kind of be living by that. And Deepa Ma's was certainly her eulogy goal was to be an embodiment of awakeness and like a lighthouse. And
Yeah.
then she did that. And now she's remembered as a lighthouse. And people always tell me when they read the book, she's an inspiration. I know that was a goal for her. Yeah.
Yeah. Eulogy goals over resume goals is one of my phrases. I love that idea. I'm so glad you brought it up. It's such a great idea. I think good meditation too, and I'm sure you've used it, is imagine yourself at 85. Like the number for me keeps getting higher as I age, but imagine yourself at 85 and what do you want around you? Who's around you? What are you doing? And all of those things to make that happen have to happen now, right? You have to take care of yourself. You have to build your strong relationships. You have to keep your mind going. It's like all these different things you think about how you want to be. And some of that is what would people say about you at that time? Because, for most of us, that would be close to our death. So I love that idea too, is, how do you get there?
Right. What would they celebrate about you?
Yes.
Yeah, that's even just a deeper level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how great if we're all living each moment what we would be celebrated for. Wow. That would be an enlightened world, wouldn't
We
it?
wouldn't have much on the news anymore. I don't
Right.
think.
Who wants to be celebrated for being hateful? I
That's
mean,
right.
maybe a few people, but they'd be few and far between. Yeah.
Yeah. What have I missed in asking, or what would you like to share?
I would just leave with kind of something Deepa would say, which is be the blessing, be the love here now. Do at least 5 minutes of meditation a day. Keep practicing. Don't give up. But be
Mm.
it now. Be the blessing. Be the love. And then keep doing it now, now, now. And share that with others. She was all about sharing the love, the calmness. Yeah. Be the peace.
Yeah, that's a really important one. And it's hard to do. You have to slow down yourself to be that calm. So you have to do the work for yourself first.
Yeah, although it's always right here. Again, don't create a doer of calm or love or blessing. It's kind of, it's just right here, almost like the breath. You don't have to do the breath. Just let it arise as you. And it's tricky. It's kind of subtle. We do have to get quiet, like you said, but kind of trust that love and blessing and truth is your natural state. And it's more like how to let it come up like a well. Oh, what are those artesian wells?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And then we don't create a doer that's doing it that will eventually have to get out of the way anyway, right? Because that's not true. So it's
Yeah, I
more
really
like
love that.
just see what it takes for you to be a vehicle for loving kindness. My teacher's always saying, he's like, Buddha now, you're Buddha now, not later.
I love that. It's just a little turn in the thinking, but it's really so impactful.
Yeah, it takes away a you that needs to do something more, and that'll happen later.
Or that it's wrong. I think you hit something because I would definitely feel that one, right? I'm not enough. I have a lot of that. I'm sure most people do. But that is nice because what it does is it reminds you that it's always there. And the divine, oftentimes called the divine is always there. So you
Yeah.
can fall back into that.
Yeah, it's always here and it'll help you wake up. And it's really leading us all the time.
Thank you so, so very much for making this time for me and the listeners. And for the book, which by the way, I have it right here. It's worth it. The whole book is worth it. That last one chapter that has all the different pieces of wisdom, the stories from all the different people, that's so worth it. It's just such a great book.
Thank you. Yeah, Dipa Ma, the life and legacy of a Buddhist master. And I also have a website. There's no money involved in it. It's just like I wanted a place for pictures of her and some
I like.
choice things. And so it's deepama.com, pretty easy to remember. And it's just a place you can go and see more pictures and maybe get a few like choice teachings and a little bit of her story if you don't have to buy the book.
I'll be going there. I'll try to remember to put that in the links as well. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Donna. I really love talking to you.
That's all for today. If you want to learn more about Amita's book and other offerings, those links will be in the episode notes. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. If it was, please subscribe, drop a review, or share it with your friends and family. That's the best way to get it in the hands of those who may benefit. And if my daughters Sienna and Sylvia are listening, I want you to know how proud I am of you. And I love you so much. Bye now.